If someone told me that Michael Schumacher's record of 91 race wins would be equaled in just 14 years, I would have said,
Are you serious?
But here we are. Lewis Hamilton has just equaled Michael Schumacher for the most number of wins in F1 history. I don't think we will realise the sheer magnitude of this achievement for quite some time. In light of this incredible feat, I wanted to take a look at a few rare moments where these two legends briefly crossed paths and found themselves dueling it out on the track. Just before we get into the video, I'd like to remind you guys to like and subscribe. According to my analytics, 92% of you guys who watch my videos aren't subscribed. So please. It was a brisk day in October of 2001. Michael Schumacher had just arrived back from Suzuka after winning his 4th world title and was on his way to participate in the World Karting Championships in Kirpen. Meanwhile, a 16-year-old Lewis Hamilton had just come off another spectacular year in karting, winning the European Formula A Championship and the Formula A World Cup in 2000. Having already secured the backing from McLaren 3 years ago, he was poised to make the switch from karts to single-seaters in the British Formula Renault Winter Series. Going into qualifying, Schumacher had set the fastest time of 43.956 seconds in the final practice session. But on that Saturday for qualifying, the drivers were split into 2 groups and Schumacher's session was hit by rain, meaning he would start 22nd on the grid. That afternoon, Schumacher and Hamilton were in the same race as each other, with the Brits finishing in 2nd place behind Antonio Liuzzi and Schumacher climbing up to 8th place. At the end of the second heat, Schumacher and Hamilton finished 16th and 26th respectively, meaning they would start from those positions for the first set of finals. Schumacher made great progress from the very onset, moving up into 3rd place, but on lap 15, he braked too deep into a tight corner, spinning his kart and stalling the engine. Eventually, he would come across the line 25th overall. On the other hand, Lewis Hamilton rose from 26th on the grid to finish an impressive P7, just 2 spots down from his teammate Nico Rosberg. In the second race, Schumacher made another flying start, moving up into 7th by the end of the first lap. By lap 11, Schumacher and Hamilton were up to 4th and 9th respectively, but after an incident between Frank Pereira and Mauro Ardijo, they both finished the race 2 positions higher. Asked about the race afterwards, Hamilton replied with, "I never really had a chance to get near Schumacher, which was a shame because I'd like to have beaten him around a few corners. I could see him in the distance in the second race, but to be fair, it didn't really make too much of a difference for me." Schumacher only had high praise for the young prodigy, stating, "He's a quality driver, very strong and only 16. If he keeps this up, I'm sure he'll reach F1. It's something special to see a kid of his age out on the circuit. He's clearly got the right racing mentality." Fast forward 5 years later, and the two would cross paths several times throughout the course of their respective seasons in F1 and GP2. Many fans will remember the 10th of September 2006 for this.
Longer than some of you wanted, but you have to set a moment and you have to find the right moment, and we feel this is the right moment. To make it short in a way, this is going to be my last Monza race I'm going to do. At the end of this year, I've decided together with the team that I'm going to retire from racing.
Just the day before, Hamilton secured the GP2 championship in relatively unusual circumstances. Race winner Giorgio Pantano initially took the fastest lap on the final lap of the Monza feature race, meaning that the championship fight between Piquet Jr. and Hamilton would go down to the wire. However, after the race, Pantano was stripped of his fastest lap, and as Hamilton previously held it, he scored the sole point he needed to secure the 2006 GP2 championship. His success also coincided with a vacancy at McLaren following the departure of Juan Pablo Montoya to NASCAR and Kimi Raikkonen to Ferrari. 3 drivers were in contention for the 2007 drive: Gary Paffett, Pedro de la Rosa, and of course, #blessed. Therefore, the best way to choose who would partner Alonso in 2007 was to see how they performed in the Silverstone test. On day 1, the aim was for Lewis to get accustomed to the car, and he didn't set a time to lap. On the second day, however, he set the 6th fastest time of the day, just under a second slower than De La Rosa. Then on the third and final day, Hamilton made a bold statement, finishing 3rd overall and ahead of the Spaniard to secure a Formula 1 seat for 2007. Another test took place in Jerez on October 12, 2006, just 4 days after the Japanese Grand Prix. A gut-wrenching engine failure saw Michael Schumacher lose the race lead and hand a 10-point advantage to Fernando Alonso with 1 race remaining. Regardless, the German took part in the same test as Hamilton, finishing the session at the top of the timesheets, with Hamilton trailing 1.2 seconds behind in P2. Lewis described that moment as surreal, mainly because he was sharing the same piece of tarmac as the great Michael Schumacher in a Formula 1 car. This opportunity would present itself once again in 2010, when Schumacher announced his return to the sport after a 4-year hiatus. The 2010 Chinese Grand Prix took place on the 18th of April, with Red Bull locking out the front row and Fernando Alonso in P3. As the cars pulled away from the line, Alonso stormed into the lead, passing both Red Bulls into turn 1, with Mark Webber snatching P2 from his teammate. However, after replays were shown, it was clear that Alonso had jumped the start, and was therefore awarded a drive-through penalty. It's safe to say that Christian Horner wasn't too amused about it. Liuzzi lost control of his car under braking as he slid backwards into Kobayashi and Buemi. As a result, the safety car was brought out and several drivers came in for intermediate tyres as the rain intensified. Rosberg, Button and the Renaults of Kubica and Petrov decided to stay out, hoping that the rain would not get any worse, and thankfully for them, it didn't, and the intermediate runners had to come in for another stop. Hamilton and Vettel both fought going into and out of the pits, with the Brits almost losing it when exiting the pit stall. After a couple of overtakes on Mark Webber and Adrian Sutil, Lewis found himself in the slipstream of the Mercedes of Michael Schumacher. Initially, he got past on the back straight with DRS, but Schumacher tucked back into his slipstream and then dived up the inside, muscling his way past the Brits at the hairpin. He found himself in the same position 2 laps later, but this time he moved over to the racing line and performed a perfectly executed switch back on the German to seize P5. He would go on to finish the race in P2, just 1.5 seconds behind his teammate Jenson Button. Meanwhile, Michael ended the race down in 10th and over a minute behind. But this was just his 4th race back after returning from retirement, and his first race where he used the intermediate tyres. Therefore, knowing how to use the tyres effectively proved to be very difficult for Schumacher, so his battle with Hamilton was a bit of a mismatch. Nevertheless, we got to see one of the greatest battles of the decade just a year later at the 2011 Italian Grand Prix. After an incident on the first lap, the safety car was deployed so that debris could be cleared up. Then on the safety car restart, Michael caught Lewis napping and overtook him down at turn 1. From then on, the duo engaged in a 30-lap long battle, giving us as fans absolutely thrilling entertainment as Sebastian Vettel moonwalked to his 18th career victory. There are videos out there showing the full battle between the two, which I'll link in the description for you guys to check out. But there are a few key moments from that battle that I will talk about in this video. Firstly, Hamilton was unable to keep pace with the Mercedes on the straights, even with the aid of a slipstream and DRS. Why is this, you ask? Well, the Mercedes were running a very low downforce setup, thereby compromising their speed through the corners for much greater top speed on the straights. This was clear every time Lewis and Michael came through Parabolica. The much grippier McLaren was able to launch off the final corner better than the Mercedes. But secondly and more importantly, Hamilton's setup was compromised due to the shorter gear ratios. This meant that whenever he reached 7th gear, the car was always hitting the rev limiter at around 330 km an hour. Having said that, he did pass Schumacher eventually at turn 1 before the German drove around the outside at Curva Grande to take back the position. He proceeded to use the entire width of the track and essentially acted as a massive roadblock for the young Brit. But the moment where Schumacher crossed the line was when he cut Lewis off and forced him onto the grass. Mercedes team principal Ross Brawn was eventually forced to step in and tell Schumacher to be more considerate when defending. Hamilton eventually managed to overtake the German at Ascari and finish the race in P4. After the race, here's what the two had to say about their deal out on track.
Tell us, did you think it was all clean and fair, his racing? At one point you were sent out onto the grass.
Yeah, that's racing.
Was all your racing clean and fair, do you think?
I think so, yes. I mean, I felt I did exactly what I was supposed to do, and as far as I understand, there was no request for me to see the stewards, so I guess all is in order.
This was the last proper face-off between the two for the rest of the 2011 season. Then, on the 28th of September 2012, it was announced that Lewis would be replacing Michael and Mercedes from 2013 onwards. But Lewis didn't feel like that was the case. I don't see myself as replacing Michael. I don't think anyone can replace Michael. He's a legend in the sport. He has achieved so much already. Michael also shared the same sentiments about Lewis. We all know Lewis is one of the best drivers we have around, and I'm sure he and the team will have a very successful future. And as we all know, Schumi's words proved to age very, very, very well. Lewis will most likely go on to break this record and equal Michael's other record of 7 world championships. We are witnessing history before our very eyes. Let's appreciate the man whilst he's still here, because I don't think we'll see something like this for a very long time. But let's also appreciate Schumi's legacy and not get into any GOAT debates, because no matter what you say, there will always be people who have different points of view that you cannot change. It's pointless comparing them to one another or other all-time greats simply because they drove in completely different eras of F1. Lewis is the best of his generation and Michael was the best of his. How about we just leave it at that and allow the two to exist as one of the many all-time greats that's graced the sports that we love. I hope you all enjoyed. Please like, share, and subscribe to the channel if you're new to enjoy plenty more videos in the future. Leave your thoughts on some of these stories in the comment section below, and as always, I'll see you in the next one.